It's the second group of prisoners the Iraqis have proudly displayed, all apparently regular Iranian army. They told us their orders still came from officers, but that mullahs were supervising the war effort in Iran. The Iranians are putting up far more resistance even on the ground than anyone ever thought possible. And as a result, the Iraqis are having to pour in far more firepower than they ever thought necessary. Boys, in. Leave the doors open, leave the doors open. Open. Okay, go. Yalla, yalla.
Geoffrey Archer for news at 10, V80 8240, take 1.
If the attack on the refinery at Abadan has been limited to the destruction of storage tanks, it will be a short-term blow for Iran. If Iraq has destroyed the refinery itself, it could almost cripple the country, because most of Iran's own fuel is produced there. But so far it has seemed to be a limited war, with no desire by either side to destroy the enemy. It was in the early hours of this morning that Iraqi tanks ground across the border into Iran. The Iraqis' declared aim is to control the Shatt-al-Arab waterway, up which ships sail to the Iraqi port of Basra. And this evening they claim to have surrounded the refinery town of Abadan and its port of Khorramshahr. That was the prime objective of the Iraqis today, but their planes bombed several other military targets in Iran, and the Iranians retaliated with air attacks on Baghdad, apparently causing widespread damage and casualties. Iraqi TV today showed pictures of what purported to be missile attacks on Iran. The weapon was a Soviet-made battlefield rocket known to NATO as Scud. It's thought to have an inertial guidance system with radio command for the early stages of flight. It's 35 feet long, the height of a house, and delivers a high explosive warhead over a distance of 150 miles. The Russians have some with nuclear warheads, but wouldn't give them to the Iraqis, who are still years away from developing their own atomic bomb. With Iran's forces run down under the Ayatollah, Iraq has double the number of soldiers, and probably double the number of usable tanks, with many more warplanes too. But what are Iraq's ultimate objectives, and what might they do next? We asked a defence analyst to speculate.
Their immediate objectives is to capture the whole of the area around the Shatt-al-Arab waterways. Having abrogated the 1975 treaty, obviously they want now to have control of the whole of the waters there, and they've taken them. I think they will consolidate that. But it's interesting that they have now apparently surrounded Abadan, which is that big refinery very close there. Kuwait, I would suggest, must be getting very concerned about what is happening, because Iraq has often tried to take Kuwait, and the last time was in 1961, when it was the British Army, Navy and Air Force in that area that stopped them. Whether they have ambitions to move inland, I think, is debatable. I would have thought that this is going to be kept limited, but of course they'll continue air raids on each other's territories, perhaps for days yet. The suggestion that the Iraqis would be tempted to move down the Gulf perhaps to the Straits of Hormuz, I think is a scenario that really isn't on. They have neither the capability to do it, and even if they got there, the Iranians, I believe, despite the disarray of their armed forces, would take care of them. So I don't believe that that is a possibility. It's going to be limited, it's going to be kept limited. Having achieved that, I think they'll consolidate and stay there.
The Iranian Navy today told shipping to keep out of its waters, but has made no apparent attempt to block the Straits of Hormuz. The Iranian Navy is the one arm of their services that the Iraqis can do little to touch. So if the Iranians did try to control the straits and stop oil shipments from all the Gulf states, America might feel sufficiently nervous to send in her Indian Ocean task force to open the waterway again. And if the Americans became involved, the Iranians could well turn to the Russians for help, and the conflict could escalate dramatically. But neither superpower wants that. The Soviet Union wants good relations with Iran as a future oil and gas supplier, but also has a friendship treaty with Iraq, which includes the supply of modern weapons like the MiG-23 fighter bombers, which Iraq is currently using to attack Iran. It's possible that in an attempt to bring the conflict to a halt, Russia could stop deliveries of weapons. And the Americans, still preoccupied with the hostages held in Iran, are desperately anxious not to become involved. If the Iranians were to release the American prisoners and demand supplies of spares for their disabled American weapons, the United States could hardly oblige without it being seen as a provocation by Iraq and Russia. The West is relatively well off for oil reserves at the moment, with an average 100 days supply. So no oil shortages are predicted in the near future, and the next few days will doubtless see a rapid growth of diplomatic pressure to stop the fighting. The Arab states, who in principle support Iraq in their punishment of the Iranians, would not want it to go too far. They don't want the superpowers to get drawn in and possibly reduce their region to chaos. It's a war that nobody wants.
The river Euphrates was the natural barrier between Iraq and Iran at this point, for though mule carts crossed to the bit of land Iraq has always owned here, bridges are few, and this pontoon device was put up to take the bulk of the Iraqi invasion. Our convoy left the river and then set out across the desert wastes in the wake of the massive Iraqi weight of armor which passed this way a week earlier. In the whirling desert dust, this shell-shocked fort marked the actual border with Iran. Around it, the first Iraqi supply camp, vehicles dotted everywhere. We were to see literally thousands of supply trucks in our trek. At each camp, the vital anti-aircraft positions protecting against Iran's most effective weapon in this war, her air power. At dusk, all traffic to the front congregates here. Because of Iran's fighter power, no Iraqi object moves inside Iran after dark. But in the setting sunlight, spirits are high as Iraqi soldiers raise their hands and weapons in victory signs. So slow had been our progress inside Iran that we had to sleep here on the bitterly cold desert floor. The forces on both sides in this war are enduring appalling heat, cold and dust, together with great shortages of food and water. At dawn, supplies are dished out from trucks, and soon, having passed beyond the supply camps, we move to a forward position 25 miles or so inside Iran. Tanks begin to move forward for today's push to finally secure Ahwaz. An Iranian army camp lies deserted beyond the Iraqi troops who now make use of it for their own needs, and who perhaps now always will. Out on the tarmac road, which links Abadan 50 miles to the south and Ahwaz to the north, a convoy of Russian-built T-55 tanks steam forward, apparently with nothing to stop them. All the evidence so far in this war is that the Iranians have kept falling back, but today proves to be different. Heavy artillery from the Iranians beyond Ahwaz forced the tanks to delay. Iraqi artillery at the roadside prepares to unleash retaliation. Suddenly, great batteries of the Iraqis let go. An artillery duel which lasts more than an hour is underway. That artillery is not aimed at Ahwaz itself, but at an Iranian position which is up on the mountains overlooking the town and which has a clear sight of the Iraqis who are ranged around the town at the bottom. Iranian shells are now raining ever nearer the Iraqi positions. It begins to look as if it will prove too dangerous for anyone to reach Ahwaz today. An armoured personnel carrier moves up with more men to man the artillery. It's beginning to become evident that the Iraqis are not in complete control of Ahwaz, contrary to what they're saying. What this battle for Ahwaz is telling us is that the Iranians are putting up far more resistance even on the ground than anyone ever thought possible. And as a result, the Iraqis are having to pour in far more firepower than they ever thought necessary. The Iraqis take us to within 10 miles of the city, to the radio station that the Iranians were still broadcasting on 3 days ago. The Iranians have gone, but suddenly the Iranian shells start coming down on the place. Chaos ensues. We have to run. Our drivers drive furiously away from the Iranian guns. In the distance, the radio station we'd stood in minutes earlier is hit. The Iranian defense of their country is far from over. Today has shown us at least that the war may now have to continue some time if Iraq is ever to win its objectives firmly enough to agree peace. Jon Snow, News at 1, outside Ahwaz in Iran. Jon Snow, News at 10, outside Ahwaz in Iran. Jon Snow for ABC News, outside Ahwaz in Iran. Pepsi-Cola's battered welcome to visitors entering Iran marks the point where Iraq's captured territory begins. The wrecked military vehicles here bear witness to the fact that in the early days of the war there was a battle for the customs post, but that the Iranians then fell back to beyond Abadan with their artillery ready to prevent the Iraqis getting further. Despite the vast weight of Iraqi artillery that is pounding at Iranian positions daily, Iran is gradually organizing the defense of what is left. Iraq is pouring literally tons of shells into both Khorramshahr and Abadan. The Iranians may have proved too late in their bid to reverse things here, but their concerted retaliation is beginning to have its effect. We were to be taken to visit liberated Khorramshahr by the Iraqis, but incoming Iranian shells hit a truck in our path and fell no more than 30 yards from our own vehicles. Chaos ensued, and we were forced to turn back.
Leave the doors open, leave the doors open. Okay, go, go.
For a second time, we set off down the main road to the town, but again the Iranians were to strike. That is the second time in 2 days that we've been pinned down by incoming Iranian fire. All the evidence then that the Iranians are still holding out very strongly on the ground and using their own artillery to get back at that original Iraqi push. The spirit of Iranian defense in the face of the Iraqi tank power has surprised everyone, not least the Iraqis. And viewed from here, it looks unlikely the Iraqis will get much further. An almost fanatical defense has been fought for Khorramshahr itself, and day by day that defense on other fronts is getting better organized. Those of us who visited Iranian bases before the war know that they have the ammunition to carry on for a long time. They've learnt how to use it and are thus far from willing to come to any peace table until Iraq pulls back. Certainly the Iraqis are not yet securely enough in control of any Iranian center to dictate terms. And that was well demonstrated by the air attack that finally forced us to give up trying to reach Khorramshahr. Jon Snow, News at 10, on the Iraqi-Iranian border. Literally tons of heavy 130mm shells have been poured around the 3 Iranian cities that Iraq is trying hardest to secure. Khorramshahr has probably taken the majority. The Iraqis are loading their guns and firing them at 3-minute intervals, whilst tanks and infantry move into the town ahead. These shells are destined for Iranian positions on the Abadan side of Khorramshahr. Today's shelling seems to have cleared enough of a path into the city to enable the Iraqis to move into this side of it. For a moment, their troops are jubilant in the streets. Vehicles move up with more infantry to press further. Scouts on motorcycles have crossed the bridge on the outskirts to determine where the Iranians are. For certain, they are still in parts of the city.
Where is it now?
The Iraqi paratroop colonel leading the assault admits as much, but says his men have now secured the port.
You now occupy the port completely. Is it now Iraqi? And what about the town?
The town, there is another troops there, our troops.
Are there any Iranians?
They are from the tanks and the other troops.
Are there any Iranians still in Khorramshahr?
Some of them. You know, it's a very big town and too much houses, and some of them, they're still there.
Suddenly, the Iranians on the other side of the city start pounding our position. Other Iranian shells are falling between the town and the Iraqi artillery we had just come from. That's as far into Khorramshahr as we can get for the moment. It's pretty clear that the Iraqis do control the port and a good part of the town, but the whole area is still very much in contention and only represents one stepping stone in what looks like still a drawn-out conflict. Jon Snow, News at 10, Khorramshahr.
It will end up in a stalemate in any case, because as I said, both sides have their own positions, and both sides talking from a position of strength, and therefore until someone has an edge, real edge over the other, it will be difficult to make the point.
And do you see that happening? Do you see any one
side? Oh yeah, I'm very confident. I'm very confident that we would. I'm very confident that both Iran and Iraq would, inshallah, see that peace is better for both.
Could we just turn to Afghanistan, which you discussed with Mrs. Thatcher? Is it your view that the fighting is going to continue, or do you think that the Russians and the Afghans, the Afghan army, will control the whole situation fairly soon?
Unfortunately, I can't do as much as I perhaps like to. But Pakistan itself hasn't got much resources, and therefore we can't give any substantial help. Neither do we want at this stage, because Pakistan cannot act as a conduit for any military assistance inside Afghanistan. But Sandy, I take my hat off to those freedom fighters in Afghanistan. Today, they're literally fighting with, if nothing else, with sticks. And the insurgency has been kept alive inside Afghanistan. This has nothing to do with Pakistan or the bordering areas between Pakistan. It is inside Afghanistan. And it shows the courage and the guts of those people who are literally fighting for their freedom. And I wish them well.
Once through the outskirts of the city, the Iraqis had dug in with tank positions which appeared markedly relaxed. Even so, the Iranians were still near enough to lob mortar fire well behind these positions. The men dug in on this sand heap represent the front line at this part of the city. Beyond them are snipers. Within moments of our arrival, a furious exchange of gunfire took place. This is the problem for the Iraqis in trying to capture Khorramshahr. There are snipers still in many of the buildings over on the other side, and that makes it extremely difficult for these people to flush them out, so that every now and then they're having to unleash a fusillade of machine gun fire from these tanks and from dugout positions over here. Arriving at the oil storage tanks at the entrance to Khorramshahr dockyard, it was clear that the Iraqis had taken undisputed control of the area. The vast stacks of containers inside the gates gave an indication of the vital economic significance to Iran of this port. Soldiers walked ahead to try to draw any lingering Iranian snipers, but there were none. This had been the port through which 80% of all Iran's imports had come until the war. The country's whole trade infrastructure was geared to receiving goods from the outside world here. At the dockside, a burnt Italian freighter. On the quay, household goods bound for Iranians who would now never receive them. Many of the ships, though, had survived the fortnight war intact, their crews still hiding aboard. This Yugoslav captain had almost despaired of escaping. He pleaded with us to get his embassy to act and help his crew of 30 to reach safety.
You have bombs?
Every day and every night we stay on board and waiting that bomb will kill us, because you can see on the ship some shot because somebody from both sides shooting, because here is Iraq, here is Iran. Huh?
The vast crew of the Greek ship next along also appeared dazed by the warfare they had survived. But as the bottom end of Khorramshahr remained engulfed in smoke, there seemed plentiful proof that the Iraqis had finally made a most significant step forward in the war. For the Iranians, the loss of this port is economically disastrous. For the Iraqis, if they can secure further down this waterway, then they do have at least one bargaining counter with which they can now try to secure what this war is really all about, the sovereignty over this waterway, the Shatt-al-Arab. Jon Snow, News at 10, Khorramshahr. Though the dockyard itself remained securely in Iraqi hands, the sound of artillery moving overhead from either side of the Shatt-al-Arab continued as both sides battled for the rest of the city. Beyond the great pall of smoke at the southern end of the port and inland from there, the Iranians still appear to be managing some kind of resistance. But those of us who have visited the Khorramshahr warfront regularly over this past week detect a falling off in the amount of mortar and artillery fire that the Iranians are putting up. From the Iraqi side of the Shatt-al-Arab waterway, to the south of that same black pile of smoke that stems from the Khorramshahr docks, the sound of artillery and mortar exchange pinpoints the battle as being between Khorramshahr and Abadan, and inland from the waterway itself. At Abadan's stricken oil refinery, there is silence. No indication of any Iranian defense here. All the signs are that the Iranian stand is being made inland, and that if the Iraqis win the current battle, Iran stands to lose a considerable area of territory. Only the occasional Iranian sniper forces the small Iraqi garrison on this side of the river to crawl about with caution. The still burning oil tanks and the bones of wrecked ships bear witness to the unpredictable course of the war so far. Even now, no one can be certain that the Iranians do not have ideas for some unexpected counter-offensive. Only when the Iraqis have fully secured Abadan can there be any prospect of their being able to run the whole of the Shatt-al-Arab, and it's only then that observers believe there will be any real prospect of the Iraqis being prepared to stop this war. Jon Snow, News at 10, outside Abadan. It's the second group of prisoners the Iraqis have proudly displayed, this time some 17 of them, some of whom had been captured in the port of Khorramshahr. All apparently regular Iranian army, they told us their orders still came from officers, but that mullahs were supervising the war effort in Iran. One of them told us he liked Khomeini before the war, but that if he was now responsible for 2 Muslim states being at war, then he wouldn't last after it. That there appear to be so few prisoners, we have seen fewer than 150 so far, would seem to confirm that little close face-to-face fighting is going on in this war. The apparently low casualties seem to support this too. Having been shown the prisoners, journalists were then taken to see a desert dump of captured Iranian vehicles. Again, not much seems to have been captured, indicating that when the Iranians withdrew in the face of the initial Iraqi invasion, they did so in an ordered fashion. Indeed, on the 3 battlefronts that we have visited so far, we have seen very few wrecked or abandoned vehicles from either side. It is a war in which aerial bombardment and heavy artillery are the weapons that determine who advances or withdraws. Yesterday it became clear that innocent merchant seamen had become the latest victims in the fighting. These Romanians had been anchored in the Shatt-al-Arab waterway and told us they'd been deliberately fired at by the Iranians.
The first bombing in room of captain, the big broke, and second next ship behind, and third bombing in engine room and fire, and plenty is mitraille.
Machine gun fire.
Yes, plenty. Yes. And another ship bombing, and the seamen jump in water and arrived in water. The Iranian with a gun
shoot them.
Yes, and when I see what happened, can I make for the ship? Nothing. Go in the water, and we arrived in the water. Another gun after us.
Their story seemed to confirm all too vividly that the war is still raging beyond the pall of smoke which hangs over the port of Khorramshahr. The indications are that the Iranians are still firmly dug in along the riverbank south of the port. The Romanians said that beside their own, 3 ships had been shot at, and that at least 5 Indian seamen had died trying to escape from their blazing freighter. The Romanian seaman's story appears to indicate that under pressure the Iranians are prepared to resort to very desperate measures, using the international shipping left in the waterway to try to ensure that even if Iraq wins it, the wreckage left behind will render it unnavigable. Jon Snow, News at 10 on the upper reaches of the Shatt-al-Arab waterway. The ship's captain had found a patch of water close to the palm trees on the Iraqi bank, which had seemed left out of the raging crossfire north and south of him. But the 40,000-ton cargo ship, one of the biggest in the waterway, had been trapped here since the war began. In desperation, having raised a white flag of neutrality, the captain had hatched an escape plan. Relayed in secret to us, the 3 possible escape nights were coded banana, pear and apple. Tonight was to be pear. With some difficulty we had alerted the Iraqi army to the plan, and after 3 days of trying, Operation Pear seemed to be on. There are problems with the coded secret escape plan that we have agreed with the master of this ship, and so the Iraqi commando major, who's in charge of this sector of the front, has decided that the only thing to do is for he and I to swim to the ship after nightfall, sort these problems out with the captain before any escape is then attempted. Communications with the ship were hard. We had to go by boat to another ship anchored well outside the war zone. This Singaporean freighter had watched out hourly for the threatened ship's signals. Now we had to use the radio to talk to the escapers in a way that others might not understand. This is Jon Snow. Do you read me over?
Yes, loud and clear. Very pleased to hear you, Mr. Snow.
It's very nice to talk to you. Just to say that we have done a complete recce and indeed have gazed upon a bearded individual on your place, and our hosts are of the opinion that it is perfectly safe for Pear. Over.
Excellent, excellent news. Well, we are completely ready, and we will arrange Pear accordingly. Seeing as you have gazed upon the individual, you know which vessel we are. At night, the vessel upriver of us shows permanently red lights, so let's not get confused, over.
The ship was lit above deck to leave the murky Shatt-al-Arab in darkness below. The 200-yard swim took us 20 minutes against a falling tide. Aboard, the Iraqi major and the ship's captain agreed final details, and stage 1 had been achieved without a shot fired. By 4 a.m., the tide had turned the ship's bows downstream. The ship's lifeboat, which was to carry all 23 escapers, was now directly opposite a small creek in which we could unload it. Suddenly, the almost silence was shattered by what seemed a devastating telltale scream as the lifeboat derricks lowered the craft into the water. But still, the snipers slept. We exchanged our agreed signals with the ship, and the lifeboat beetled for the riverbank in front of us. The captain could hear its safe arrival on a radio in the boat. A babble of excitement broke out as the trapped seamen and their wives touched ground for the first time in a month.
Okay. Step right across. You're okay.
They marched half a mile in single file, carrying what little they could rescue of their possessions. Winding paths through villages of mud-built houses. And at the Army's command post, relief that Operation Pair had been achieved. The small band of Iraqi soldiers who had secured the riverbank during the rescue provided beds to relax upon as the escapers told of their experiences.
What about the actual journey from the boat, from the ship to the shore?
That was the worst part, quite honestly. We thought that, you know, we were sort of dreading that more.
Well,
than
if anything
else.
was going to happen, it would
happen then.
Yeah.
You know.
Surely, but,
There was the 3 wives. We were thrown in first, basically, and
the first one's
right,
thrown out.
yeah, that's right. The first one's thrown out as well. But we were all sat together, sort of clinging on to whatever was available, because we were told there was going to be a hell of a jolt when we hit the bank, and hanging on to each other.
It was quite a relief to know that you'd be here, sort of at the other side, waiting for us. You know, this light was going in, rather than just going away to the side,
and not knowing
taking
what was
potluck,
going to be
you know.
there.
Whilst this crew enjoys its first dawn of freedom, only cooperation from local Iraqi army commanders has enabled them to do so. Far greater international pressure is going to be needed if the scores of other crews and ships in the Shatt-al-Arab waterway are to be freed. Jon Snow, News at 10, Southern Iraq.
The Shatt-al-Arab waterway is Iraq's only link with the sea. In peacetime, its wharves and channels are crowded with ships. And when the Gulf War broke out, 63 of the world's merchant vessels were caught here, many quite literally in the crossfire. At least 10 crewmen were killed and many others injured. In all, 29 ships were strafed, shelled or bombed. Those that were undamaged are further up the Shatt-al-Arab, away from the heart of the fighting. They range from 14,000 tonners to a score of elegant little wooden-hulled dhows. They just sailed in from India and Pakistan to unload their cargoes of jute at the port of Basra. Now, big or small, they're stuck. The daily ritual of life goes on with no prospect of escape. Iraq says that, provided they fly the flag of the International Red Cross, the ships may leave. But with the fighting still fierce down around Abadan, many of the captains are worried that because they've traded with Iraq, the Iranians might attack them if they dare move. The Singapore-registered Timor Endeavour is one of the luckier ones. She's unharmed and 10 miles from the battle line. There are 7 crew left on board, and their only problem is boredom.
You lost again. Dishwasher. You lost
For the ship's master, the dilemma has been to convince the owners that it's impossible to leave, and at the same time to persuade Lloyd's insurance underwriters that the vessel is not in extreme danger. In fact, while the ship's lain idle here, her owners have paid over £250,000 in war zone insurance premiums. At that rate, they'd equal the total value of the ship in just 10 weeks. So like many of the owners, they've now cancelled the payments. Loss of profits is still impossible to gauge, but for all the ships now in the waterway, it's likely to amount to hundreds of millions of pounds. and most of the ships are unlikely to get out and back to business until the war's over, because apart from the risk of making a break for it, the channel itself is blocked by abandoned vessels. Derek Taylor, News at 10 on the Shatt-al-Arab waterway.